corridor and see if, okay, Becky's back on, it looks like. Okay, never mind.
Sorry, we lost a few. I lost my internet, and I know Rita did. Good to see everybody. It was quite dramatic. But Gail was very positive we all have internet, so that's great to see. I'm gonna just let Rita know, and I'm sorry for interrupting. If you just let me call Rita so she's back online too. Did you start, Paul?
No, I actually had a little power surge here also, so I got knocked off. I'm just getting back on.
Okay, so everybody did experience that power wave that happened.
Not the dirt roads.
Well, Briggs Road did.
Oh, right.
Yep. So I will call Rita and I'll be right back.
Maybe that was it, yeah.
This is Gail speaking. If anybody got knocked off, it sounds like there was some kind of power surge. And if that happened, their router would have gone down, and it's going to take just a couple of minutes for it to reboot when the power comes back on, even if it's just a momentary blip. So if anyone is struggling to get back on, just have them wait for that power to cycle back up and their router to come back on.
Well, that was amazing timing. Maybe, okay. Well, I show that there's 32 participants and we're expecting more. Rita to join, and then we can get started. Paul?
Yeah, I think given the circumstances, maybe we should just wait a couple more minutes in case people are having trouble getting back in.
Yep, good idea.
All right, so my screen is showing that no one seems to be frozen, which I think is a good sign, right? So we think we should get started?
Sounds good.
Okay, well, welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us for this discussion about policing in Shutesbury. This forum is a joint initiative between the Shutesbury Select Board and our police chief, Dan Fernandez. Maybe the first of several, or it may be a one and done deal, but either way, the intent is to provide a better understanding of the structure and the function of the Shutesbury Police Department, and to foster greater communication and information sharing between the department and town residents. My name's Paul Lyons. As the town moderator, I was asked to moderate this evening's discussion. I'm joined tonight, obviously, by Chief Fernandez, and looks like there may be a couple other members of the police department that Dan will introduce, I'm sure, later. I believe our all three of our select board members are here, Melissa, April, and has Rita joined us at this point? Not sure. But anyway, select board members are here, and also our town administrator, Becky Torres. The format for the evening is fairly simple. After some opening remarks, Chief Fernandez will provide an overview of the department and how it operates. Then we'll move into some questions and answers where I'll pose questions that were submitted by residents. And if time permits, we'll open it up towards the end to additional questions that you can submit this evening. That may be a big if, however, since I've already received about 66 individual questions as of this morning, many of which I thought were very thoughtful and very germane to the current day policing issues that we're seeing throughout this country, actually. So I want to thank all who submitted questions for this evening. I did ask those that submitted questions, and I'll do so again this evening, to identify themselves, at least to me, so that I can be sure that they were indeed town residents, but also to reduce the possible incidence of inappropriate questions, which has happened in previous forums, and I want to try to avoid that this time. However, I will not be identifying any of the questioners when I pose your questions to the chief. Finally, in regards to the questions that I did receive, a number of them were very similar or very similar vein. So if you don't hear me ask your specific question this evening, it may be because it was rolled into others into a more general question on a particular theme. So that's the way we're going to approach the questions later, is basically by theme. A few questions were just not really appropriate for this forum. And further, as I said, we may not have time to get to all of the questions that you'd like to be able to ask. So if you don't hear the question or the answer that you're most interested in or that you're waiting for, I'm sure the chief will be more than happy to have you follow up with him directly at some point after this forum. So that's all I want to say for now. I want to ask the select board members if any of you would like to say things before I turn it over to Chief Fernandez.
Well, I guess I've been looking forward to this. I think this is really the root of the community policing that we and the select board have supported with our chief. And I'm looking forward to this evening.
I will reiterate what April just said. Thank you, April.
Great. And do we know yet if Rita has been able to join us? Oh, that sounds like Rita.
I've joined you by phone, but I still have not been able to log into Zoom. So I just dialed in. So I apologize for that. I'm not sure. I've tried many times to. Anyway, I'm glad so many people could join us this evening, and I am looking forward to this being really the first of a number of conversations with Chief Fernandez and the department. So, and thank you, Paul, for agreeing to moderate, and thank you. Sounds like there are at least 40 people who've shown up tonight. So I will mute myself now.
Great. Okay, and with that, I will turn it over to Dan Fernandez, our police chief, to give us an overview of his department. Dan.
Hello, and thank you everybody for joining us tonight. I know everybody's time is valuable, and we're hoping to have a pretty open and productive conversation tonight. So I'm going to start off with a few things as part of what we do here at the Shutesbury Police Department. When I took over about 2 years ago, the Shutesbury Police Department was well into working with a community policing foundation of the department. My goal was to kind of continue to move that forward in a very forward manner into communicating with the public and making people feel comfortable with the police department. I think that's one of the main missions of our department, is to be out there and be involved in the public space and get to know as many residents as we can on a daily basis. With recent events, obviously, it's a little harder for person-to-person contact, but that is the goal of the department, to make people feel comfortable, especially working with the children at the school, and getting them having a positive interaction with police early on. We have 3 full-time officers positions. Right now, we're running 2 part-timers, or actually 3 part-timers rather, and me being the only actual full-timer. We do have some part-timers that are working full-time, close to full-time hours, and one that will be going through the academy in September to come back to the police department after the academy as a full-time officer. The goal is to keep and continue to have 2 full-time officer positions, 1 full-time chief, and part-timers to fill in those spaces. Each officer in the department receives a mandatory 40 hours a year of training. There's a few topics later on that will touch on some of the training specifically, but the training includes legal update, use of force training, diversity training, juvenile law, elderly law, a gamut of things that change yearly and almost monthly in policing. So our officers receive that 40 hours a year mandatory training, and on top of that, we have officers that are always looking to do things that interest them or other things that might be pertinent to what we do in Shutesbury. Scheduling and coverage in town. Our goal overall is to cover 16 hours a day from about 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. And some of those days start with and have overlap coverage. So there is 2 officers on at one time, especially during the school day. We have usually 2 officers on during the school day for drop off, and sometimes in the morning or other way around, sometimes in the morning for drop off and in the afternoon for pickup at the school. So we cover, basically that's our goal. We're looking to get a little more staffing in with a new part-timer that's training now, so that will increase coverage on the weekends. Shutesbury Police Department covers a variety of different calls. We respond to all medical calls. Because we do have a call fire department, they respond to everything as it comes in. On all the off hours that we're not here, they're out there responding to these calls, coming from their homes, and respond directly to your house. But when we're here, we respond directly to every medical call for service. We also respond to calls for domestics in progress. Last year, we had a few fights we had to respond to. We had actually 2 near drownings at the lake last year that we responded to. So there's a lot of different call variety that we deal with in Shutesbury. It is a smaller town by population, but with the amount of officers we have and the variety of calls we deal with is the same as any other town, just on a possibly less frequent basis. But we do respond to basically everything you could think of, from the worst calls to something even mundane as a dog barking complaint. So we deal with all that type of stuff. We have a lot of things that are going well for the department right now. We have 2 very, very good and very well-rounded people working for me on a more full-time basis. And we hired them more recently. And those 2 officers, I believe, are in this chat. And if Kristen, you want to...
Hi, everybody. I'm Kristen Burgess, and I'm super happy to be working in the town of Shutesbury. I do come from another department. I worked in the Berkshires for a period of time, also in a small town, and I absolutely love this town.
Okay. And Marcus.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marcus Johansson. I've been working here since about April now. I'm a town resident. My family lives here in town as well. I've been loving my time here.
Just get back to my page here. So those are the officers that we have working for us right now. There is a couple other part-timers that work on a more infrequent basis, but those two officers there that you just were introduced to are the ones that you're going to see most of the time out on the road, along with myself. These are the people that you should feel very comfortable in talking to and going up to in any situation that you may need to talk to them about. We've dealt with people with neighborly disputes where we're able to, fix that situation without it going anywhere further, just by mediating. And that's one of the best things I think that we've been able to do with the group we have now is work with using every trick in the bag, I guess you could say, in order to solve those types of problems and any other problem like that without bringing in any other sort of, authoritarian figure to solve those problems with court or anything like that. So we've been able to do a lot of that with the people we have and continue to keep the community policing as an important part of what we do. Paul?
Yeah, still here. So, a few other the general questions about the operation of the department that came to me. First of all, is there actual? I mean, you described, the goal of the department. Is there an actual mission statement per se, or is your goal pretty much your mission?
Yeah, I would say. I would say what I just explained. I mean, a one-line mission statement is certainly not anything that I'm good at creating. I think that the mission statement should be something that's fluid at all times. So, I mean, your mission statement can change daily with the concerns or worries of the town. So if we get 5 complaints in a day about people speeding up various roads in town, I mean, my mission of that day would be to solve the problems of those people that they're having. So I think that everything can change daily. But I think, community policing and actually doing it and actually making it a real thing that the officers want to do is important, because you can't just force somebody to want to do that or be involved in the community in that way, because not everybody wants to do that.
Okay, you did talk a bit about the specific training that your officers get. I think there will be some more specific questions related to that a little bit later on, but we'll leave that for now. You've talked about the scheduling too a little bit, which was good. How about this? What types of calls do you receive on average? How do they break down? Drug-related, dog issues, family violence, theft, automobile accidents. How would you say the calls break down in a typical week, say?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we can have a variety of different things happen in a week. There'll be some weeks where, we'll deal with 4 car crashes. And then some weeks where we'll deal with, family disputes and things of that nature. So the breakdown is pretty sporadic, I guess you could say, on a weekly or monthly basis. But I think that, we deal with a variety of different things. I guess the breakdown, I mean, I'd have to go through all the logs for the past year or two to see what the exact breakdown was. But, we deal with, a lot of different things, I guess you could say. A day could be different. Every day can be different, because we may not have the highest call volume, but, there could be days where we deal with things that are very tough calls for officers to go to, and days where, you're just trying to, help a little kid get back home after running away or something like that. So we deal with it all.
Okay, I'm just going to take a pause here, and I've got a request to have everybody that is not talking at present mute themselves. I don't know that I have the capability of doing that, but if you could all just mute yourselves so that we don't have background noise, that would be appreciated. So I guess a related question, Dan, would be, if you can answer this one, you know, presently, what would you say takes up most of the time for the police department? I mean, is it paperwork, you know, overall? Is it, you know, patrolling, you know, in kind of general categories?
Yeah, I think for me, you know, a lot to do with the license to carries and, you know, processing that type of stuff, coming up with new policies on my end, you know, procedural things, billing. But for the officers, I think as of late, follow-ups to incidents that have occurred. So, you know, the incident may take an hour to, you know, solve the problem at hand. But after that, there is always follow-ups, and the officers that we have working here right now are incredible at following up and making people understand that, you know, we're not just there for the initial incident, but we are there to continue to follow up and make sure that we get to the bottom of whatever may be happening on both sides of a situation, whatever it may be. So I think following up, you know, responding to various complaints in town of speeding, or various, you know, complaints of, you know, we've had a few dogs that have been loose in the past, more recently. So responding to those, you know, just keeping up with as much as we can with the staffing that we have, as far as with things that come into the police department daily. So.
Okay, thanks. So the last of the very general questions, and this is a two-part question. What would you say is going well right now in the department, and what are your primary challenges?
Yeah, so I touched on what's going well a little bit. I think that what's going well is that we have great people working here right now. I can't speak for me. I can speak for the people that work for me, but we have great people working here right now, and that is definitely what's going well. As far as the challenges, I think it is finding qualified people for the job. I think that's one of the biggest challenges to any, you know, business, police department, whatever it may be. I think that that's one of the biggest challenges, and I think it's still a challenge that I face right now. The select board and the town has always been very supportive of what I've been trying to do in the past 2 years. So I would say it's definitely trying to find the right people for the job.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to some more specific questions right now. First one is, are you still processing LTCs, or license to carry permits, right now?
Yes, we are. We are still processing these. We are doing it in a more social distancing manner, with most things being done via email. Send in your application via email, and then we'll either have an officer go out to you and take a picture of you for your renewal. And if you're doing a new application, then we'll go out to you and actually do the fingerprints and at your home and meet up with you to do that. So we are still processing. It's just a little different, and it's a little longer of a process at this point, but we're still processing them and getting them back from the state.
I know in the past, the state was really lagging, you know, doing their part of the process. Is that still the case?
It is. And I mean, you know, that's something that, you know, you can't hold them at fault for it, because the individual people that are running it are great. It's just about having a backlog of LTCs and just trying to keep everything, you know, where it needs to be. So they're doing a good job out there. It just takes time.
Great. So here's a specific question. The state has a no idling law, and some people feel that the police patrol vehicles are idling too much. Is there a way to cut down on that?
So, I mean, as far as vehicles idling without officers in them, that's already been a directive of mine to put a stop to that. There was an email directive put out quite a while ago. If you're not in your vehicle shouldn't be idling. If you're talking right now at 97 degrees out and we have equipment in the vehicles that needs to stay going. And if you let it just run off the battery, it would certainly drain the battery very quickly. The vehicles will be idling in order to accomplish that goal. And in the winter, the same thing. So for heat, air conditioning, and really importantly, to kind of keep the components running in the cruiser that keep us in contact with dispatch, because our portable radios that are on our belt don't work very well at all. So our cruiser radio is really the one line of connection we have with dispatch.
Okay, thank you. Here's another question from a resident. Are you familiar with the 8 Can't Wait campaign? And if you aren't already doing, some of those steps, are you willing to work with the community to implement them?
Yes, I am familiar with it, but I think that the 8 Can't Wait, we have in our policy that covers, I believe, the vast majority of that. 8 Can't Wait as far as the 8 steps that they're looking for. And, we cover most of that within our policy already. The only thing I think that's not specifically covered in that policy is the mandated reporting or the intervene portion of that. And I've made that very clear directive of my own upon just an interview process to any potential interview candidate that if you don't do that, you just won't work here. So, we're very lucky to have good people working here that will do the right thing. So most of those things are covered in our policy.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Can you just give us, for those that are not familiar with it, just a few examples of what those 8 recommendations are? At least a few of them?
Yeah, sorry, there's just a 911 call that came in. I'm just listening. Sorry, Paul, what was your question again?
It was in relation to the 8 Can't Wait campaign, and I'm not sure that everyone's familiar with that, even though it has been in the news a little bit lately. And I was just wondering if you could give people just a couple examples of some of the recommendations that are in that list.
Okay, yeah, we have, so the 8 that are there, banning chokeholds and strangleholds is one of the first boxes they have in the 8 Can't Wait campaign. I went to the academy 9 years ago now, and in the academy, nobody in that academy or myself was ever taught to chokehold anybody. And in the 9 years since then, in every defensive tactics instruction class that I've gone to, that's never been taught. So this is never something that is taught by the MPTC, the Municipal Police Training Committee. This is something that's not taught already in Massachusetts. So, I mean, it's not something that we deal with right here. De-escalation is another part of that. De-escalation techniques are taught from the full-time academy, and I went 9 years ago. I think there was a 20-hour class that every officer took in order to just teach de-escalation techniques verbally. So that's something that's already taught. And in addition to that, is taught in many of the required 40-hour classes that you're required to do every year. The require warning before shooting, that type of thing is something that we're always taught. You're taught that at firearms training. Every single year you go to firearms training, you're taught to verbalize. Every single time you pull your firearm out, you're verbalizing and using your verbal commands in order to let somebody know in the best way possible that you need to, drop the weapon or get on the ground or whatever it may be. So that's something we already use. Exhaust all means before shooting. that's something that we're taught as well. I mean, we're taught in firearms training to pull out a less lethal option and then put that away and then pull out a firearm. So this is stuff that's all ingrained in your training every year. The duty to intervene, I think that duty to intervene is going to come down to what my directive is, which is do it or don't work here. And it's going to come down to there being a good person working there. The most important thing is to have good people. If you have good people working for you, then they're going to do the right thing. And no amount of training is going to change that. So we need to have good people in order to have those people that are going to do the right thing. To ban shooting on moving vehicles, that's, I believe, in our policy that that you cannot do that. So it's never been something that we've ever been taught, and it's never been something that we'll do. The require of a use of force continuum. We have a use of force continuum in Massachusetts. I've been taught that for the past 9 years, and the newer officers have been taught that since they started. Use of force continuum is something that Massachusetts has used throughout, and well before I became an officer. Comprehensive reporting. I'm very lucky. I don't have much reviewing to do with the report writing from my officers. We also have body cameras. So every officer is always recording during an incident, which adds even more comprehension to what happened in each situation.
All right, that's great. Thank you. So, some of us that have been around for a while remember a number of years ago, I think at a town meeting, when our police chief stood up and basically suggested that he could enhance a town's revenues by stopping more vehicles, especially down on Route 202. So one of the questions that did come up is, are your officers required to issue a minimum number of tickets per month? And relatedly, do they receive any kind of bonus or any kind of other incentive for specific accomplishments?
So to answer the two questions, no and no. To answer those two questions quickly, to go further into that, I can't remember the exact number of times I have said it. But the Shutesbury Police Department, in my time here, has never been and will never be a revenue generating source for the town of Shutesbury. That's not our job, and that's not what we'll do. It may be an unfortunate byproduct of someone that may get a citation, but this is not something that I promote. In multiple open meetings with the select board, I have said that I would rather have an officer go down, and I use the lake as an example, go down to the lake and have a 20-minute conversation with a resident and create a lasting impression and a lasting friendship or a lasting trusting relationship than make one traffic stop. So I make that very clear from the very beginning. I think Marcus can attest to this, and Kristen, she just went on a call, but she can attest to this. This is said in the interview process. So this is one of the things that I say in every interview for every officer. So no, certainly is not my priority or my goal ever.
Okay. You mentioned the lake, and there were a couple people who were asking about the lake and Lake Wyola State Park in particular, and even more specifically about some of the local residents who are parking vehicles on their private land down there, making some money at it, but probably of more concern was increasing the density of people that were using the lake, which led to more challenges to keep social distancing. And then also, I know people mentioned the just more pedestrians walking those narrow roads, and that windy, narrow road leading from the dam over to the beach. So is there anything that can be done about that, either from your department or maybe even the select board might want to weigh in on this?
So from our end of things, the police department has taken a more proactive approach this year as far as signage and barriers up along the guardrail there by the dam in that specific space. And as far as people parking cars on their private property, without an enforcement, mechanism as far as a bylaw or something like that, there's nothing we can do to stop them from doing that. The state beach, which is under the control of, DCR, they would have to actually stop people from entering the beach, at the gate. And they don't do that. So that's something that we have a hard time with. I don't know what the select board's opinion is on that, but we have done what we can to prevent people from parking in spaces that are actually going to cause a road hazard. And then during heavy, busy times at the lake, we are down there, in a pretty active patrol function, slowing cars down and keeping the road safe for the pedestrians walking. So that's our goal there.
Do any select board members want to add anything to that?
Sorry, this is Melissa. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes. So we're not in session, so I'm just going to voice my personal opinion as a town member and a select board member, but not within committee with my other members, is that private property follows private property rules, and the select board could take it up as a discussion maybe at a future meeting. But private property is private property, and we would have to see what those rules are and what we can or can't enforce.
And I also am not sure how much more we can get from the people, the state who are monitoring the DC at the lake through the DCR to really be able. They're really minimally staffed, and we've been working with them as well. But this is something we can take up at a meeting.
Paul?
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention the reason DCR allows walk-ins is part of the original agreement, I believe. They don't do it in all parks, but because so many of the people around the lake advocated for it, we do, they do allow the walk-ins. So the town really doesn't, we help create that problem. The second issue, we can't enforce the parking on private property. We can only enforce it on town property, and that's what the police department has been doing with all the cones they've been using. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're ready to move into some of the main themes of a lot of the other questions, and we've already kind of started in on the first one, which is some COVID or pandemic related issues. A number of people asked about mask wearing by police officers, and if they wear them, when they wear them, and why they don't wear them when some people feel they should be wearing them.
Yes, and I think that I've received a few emails about this and tried to respond the best way I can to a few emails. The officers are encouraged to wear face masks at all times where social distancing is not able to happen in relation to working with the public. They try at all times to keep 6 feet apart when they are working with the public. Obviously, traffic stops are a harder situation for that to occur. And during traffic stops, my officers have expressed very real concern and safety issues that I agree with. While walking up to a car on a traffic stop, you're looking for potentially impaired drivers where, the smell of something is very important to figuring out if that's occurring. Also, in those type of situations or any other type of situations dealing with somebody, a mask can very easily, so I guess it's a little harder to, it's harder with this type of mask. So this is the N95 mask, and generally speaking, it's what the officers wear. And if one of these were to get pushed up, this metal thing gets wrapped around right here around the top bridge of your nose, it can certainly cause a safety hazard for the officers that are involved in any traffic stop or situation like that. So those are the situations where they wouldn't wear them. But generally speaking, we try to wear masks at any time where we cannot socially distance, I would say, then other than really traffic stops where the majority of the time you're, above the window and the door frame of the vehicle, and you are stepped behind the front door. So there is less chance of, transmission at that point. And you're also, outside the vehicle and they're inside the vehicle. I don't know the exact science certainly about, how effective, just keeping your head above the car is and speaking like that. But, that's the situations where that might be the case. During the pandemic, we have dropped our traffic stops by a very marked margin. I would say at least 75%. So officers really aren't stopping cars unless it's a very blatant violation. So we are reducing our interaction with the public as far as that goes as well.
Okay, well, that was actually the next question on the list about traffic stops during the pandemic. So you've answered that one, but a follow-up question on that was, will that likely change if and when we get lots of college students returning to the area?
I don't know if that'll change. The Franklin County Chiefs haven't met in quite a while, and we're working together as to figure out what the best avenues to go with that. Some departments have slowly gone back to stopping cars on a more complaint-based stop, which is tough, especially for us up here, because my goal is to obviously try and solve the problem before it becomes one, but with also, respecting the, suggested social distancing guidelines and having that. So it's a balancing act, certainly. But we do still make traffic stops, and for blatant violations, things like an inspection sticker or things of that nature, we're probably not doing right now. Brake light out, things like that. Probably not as much going to happen. But blatant violations of, speed or reckless driving or things like that, we definitely are approaching and stopping.
Okay, there was some useful information there. So,
yeah, don't worry about your tail lights. Your tail lights are fine. Your tail lights are fine.
So I think you've answered this already, but let me ask it anyway, just in case you have anything else to add. Are you attempting to enforce social distancing and PPE use at the Lake Wyola State Park?
No, as a general rule of thumb, we're not. Anytime, I see somebody or talk to somebody in town, I generally encourage them to stay away from the state beach because it's been so busy. But there's no enforcement mechanism for us. So there's no, we could walk up to a group of people and say, hey, you have to keep it 6 feet apart. And then they tell us to go, take a walk, and well, there's nothing we can do. So really by doing that, you're inviting a negative interaction with the police department to a point where, there's really no enforcement mechanism to, require somebody to do that. So.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to move on to the next theme, which is speeding reduction. First question related to that is, what options do you use to reduce speeding vehicles in town?
So we have a gamut of things that we can use. Our number one thing that works the best is being on patrol. Being visible to the town residents, being visible to people passing through. And that always slows people down. As you can imagine, if an officer drives by you, you slow down, generally speaking. I know I do still. So I think that's one of the biggest things we use. We also, do conduct traffic stops where we may give a verbal warning, a written warning, or a civil citation. Our numbers in this department are definitely more towards verbal warnings and written warnings than civil citations, but that's another mechanism we use. At one point, I did borrow Pelham PD's radar sign, which shows how fast you're going. That was in front of the fire department for a couple weeks last year. That seemed to help, and it seemed to get people to understand that there is a pretty drastic speed reduction as you're coming up the hill. So that seemed to help. We do use that. Within the cruisers, we do have radar units that are mounted within the cruiser, and they are mounted in the front and back. The antennas are on each side, so we can get people coming towards us, and then as they go behind us as well. So we do have those as well that do work in helping us work with speed issues. We do have a speed sign that the town has and has had, but it is in disrepair right now. But it shouldn't. It's less visible than the big one I brought, but it is in disrepair right now. But it will be hopefully something that I'll be able to fix. So.
Okay, as you know, I mean, there were a couple questions about the speed boards, because I think someone must have seen one behind the highway department or something and wanted to know what's going on with that. So there did seem to be, just so you know, some interest in utilizing techniques like that, non-punitive type techniques.
Right. Yeah, and absolutely. And I think starting off, at the last segment or before the last one, talking about the officers and if they have a ticket amount they have to do, I think generally speaking, we are a very non-punitive department as far as enforcement techniques. And I'm sure the numbers would show that. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I think that, my philosophy is certainly not driven towards money citations. So as far as that goes, and I'm certainly open to any and all ideas in order to slow people down, especially through the center of town, Montague Road, West Pelham, every road in town we've had issues in. So that's definitely a goal of mine.
Okay, good. So I guess the last question in this theme is in regards to the radar guns. And you remember we had some interesting discussion at town meeting about this, and several people have brought it up again. I think one of the questions related to that you might be able to address now is if the vehicles are all equipped with vehicle-mounted radar units, why do you need to have the radar guns when a lot of people find them very intimidating?
So the reason why is because to operate the radar antennas on your cruiser, to operate those from a stationary position on the side of the road, your vehicle has to be sideways or perpendicular with the roadway. And there's many areas in town where you're unable to park your vehicle where it's perpendicular with the roadway, where you may have an old logging road that you can back into or place to park. So that is the reason why a radar gun comes in handy. The reason why is because when you have your cruiser parked, I guess facing as if you're pulling out into the roadway, you can sit there and rest the radar gun on the door of the cruiser and calculate people's speeds as they go by. So that's the reason why a radar gun's helpful, because you can't turn the antenna that's mounted in the cruiser to go with the roadway as you're facing out. So that's part of the reason why those are very helpful.
Okay, I do want to reiterate again that, several people, both in the questions I received, and I happen to see some of the comments on Nextdoor Shutesbury as well, have concerns about the appearance, I guess, of having what looks like a gun pointed at them. So if people that are with us here tonight have additional questions on that, I would just encourage them to contact you directly, Dan, so that they can further explore those.
Yeah,
those ways.
absolutely. And I mean, if somebody were to look up a radar gun or of any kind online, they don't look like a gun pointing at you. So it's not a barrel of a gun that's pointing at you. It's more of a sphere, like that's about this big, that would be, kind of out the side window. This isn't something that's going to be really immediately apparent to somebody that's driving by, to be honest, because it's not something that we're not, generally speaking, it's definitely not something where an officer would be jumping out into the roadway or, pointing at a car in a sort of aggressive manner in any way, because the radar gun needs to be in a stationary position in order to work. So for that to work, you need to be standing still. So, I do understand those concerns. And as you said, I encourage anybody that has any further questions to call me or email me at the police.chief@shutesbury.org email. I do respond to that fairly quickly most times of the day. So certainly reach out.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to the next theme, which I'm calling diversity-related issues. And let's get back to the officer training again. Do officers receive training on the range of diversity issues, for example, cultural, racial, ethnic, gender-related, that also address the implicit biases that many of us have?
Yeah, so I could start with me. I went to implicit bias training for the past 3 years, and it has changed somewhat over the past 3 years. I wouldn't say it changed dramatically, but the implicit bias training that I've gone to is certainly eye-opening. Kristen has also gone to implicit bias training at her last employer, which is a 20-hour course, or I believe a 20-hour course that she went to for implicit bias training. Marcus, I believe, will receive that this year in his 40-hour training, and then again he'll receive it at the police academy, because they have I think a 2 or 3 day block on implicit bias. So those are the trainings, and those trainings cover the kind of the entirety of those issues the best they can within their time constraints, I'm sure. But yes, we do receive those trainings.
All right, I was just allowing you to listen there if you need to.
Yeah, sorry, it's loud, isn't it? So
No, that's fine. I understand you're on the job here. Maybe if you do need to listen to a call, Dan, you could maybe just kind of put your hand up so that I know that I shouldn't speak.
Yeah, this one isn't for us. So
okay,
that's okay.
All right. So next question: do officers receive training in dealing with people on the autism spectrum?
There is training within the academy now. I got that same training 9 years ago when I was in the academy. I don't believe there has been anything pushed as far as from a state level as far as that type of training, although it is very important. We're also very lucky in the sense the officers that we have working for us have not only personal life experience with that, but also have some professional experience with that in their other capacities in their other jobs. So we have a lot of officers that have, our two main officers have well more training than a 2 day training or a 3 day training on how to work with people with autism. And I think that, it definitely is something we'd look at in the future, but I think for right now, our officers are certainly equipped to deal with those types of situations.
Just wondering, as you're talking about your other officers, whether it's appropriate or you would want either one of them, Marcus or Kristen, to chime in at any point in the evening if they have something that they'd like to add to what you said?
Well, I can certainly ask. I don't know if Kristen is here.
Looks like she is, yeah.
Oh, she is. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if it's okay with you, I mean, if they wanted to say something, maybe they again could just raise their hand or shake their hand,
Yeah,
and I'll acknowledge them.
Yeah, I mean, Marcus, do you mind chiming in on the autism, people with autism?
I do not mind. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we
I
can.
Okay. As Chief kind of touched on, I actually have members of my family that are on the spectrum. So even though I am fairly new to law enforcement, I have a lot of experience just from my personal life, which has come in handy on several occasions, several calls that I've gone to already, even working here. And as Chief mentioned, I will be going to the full-time in September, full-time academy in September, and I believe it's a 40-hour course that additional course that I will get when I go there.
Okay, that was 40. Okay, Kristen.
Can you hear me okay?
Can
Yes,
hear
we
you.
can.
Yep.
Okay. Yes, so I also have a family member with autism who is on the spectrum. And I have been lucky enough to have worked in school districts before law enforcement, working on a behaviorist level with many different diverse developmental disabilities and also on the spectrum. And I'm also proud to say that I know sign language, and I am not an interpreter, but I am decently fluent.
Very good.
That's great. That was very helpful to hear from both of you, so thank you. And finally, in this theme, what steps or changes have been made in the past few months in light of the increased awareness around the country around both policing in general, but mainly about around structural racism?
So I would like to, so as far as changes in our police department, we haven't made very many because I believe our police department was doing the right thing prior to the incident that occurred, the murder that occurred. So I think that our department has had awareness about, you know, kind of how to be a good person. I guess maybe before it was cool, because, you know, we're just lucky to have those type of people working here. So I think we haven't made many steps to change the department because I think we were heading in the right direction and are in the right direction already. And unfortunately, for some of these larger departments, maybe, you know, within Mass or outside of Mass, they might have issues with terrible, terrible people that work there. But we don't have that issue here in Shutesbury.
Okay, we're going to move on to firearms. Is it necessary for the Shutesbury Police Department officers to always wear a gun?
Yes. Yes, it is. Unfortunately, this is one of the not so appealing parts of the job for what I think for really any officer. I'm certainly not a big gun person. I don't own very many firearms at all. And I think that it's one of the necessary evils of policing. Unfortunately, in our society today, you don't know when you may or may not need that type of force in order to stop an evil person from doing something evil. And so the answer to that question is yes, but it's more of an unfortunate yes, because it's something that if we didn't have to, I probably wouldn't.
So would that apply to private homes too, for like any call where an officer has to be in a resident's home?
Absolutely. You run into a lot of issues within people's homes, depending on the situation, but any situation really. I mean, when an officer goes into somebody's home for, say, a family domestic situation or a family incident, you are actually, the statistically likelihood of something bad going on wrong is way higher in somebody's home because you are in somebody's home. And, we take that very seriously. We take it very seriously that we have that responsibility and that ability to be in somebody's home in order to either help them, potentially affect an arrest for somebody who's abusing somebody. So we take that responsibility very seriously, and we take the responsibility of our firearms very seriously. This is something that, is ingrained in you throughout policing, and for many people, it's ingrained in you from, a young age if you're around firearms. So I think we take that very seriously. And yes, we have to, because we don't know when a situation may change or when we may need to leave that situation to go to another one in the same breath. So we don't really know. So it's very important.
So I think the person who broached that question had an experience with an officer being there for, I think, a medical emergency, and she was concerned about having that firearm in her home. So even in a situation like that, if I understand you correctly, the officer still needs to be able to have their firearm on their person rather than, say, lock it in their vehicle. Is that right?
Right. Yes. To answer the short answer to that question is yes. I think that officer that's cognizant of his surroundings and is able to pick up on pretty, I would assume, pretty blatant social cues will understand that maybe this person isn't comfortable with me being in here, and maybe there isn't a position for me to help somebody while I'm in here. So maybe I should get out of the house and make this person more comfortable. Sometimes we are there to assist the fire department or the ambulance service in helping get the person out of the home, whether it be on a stretcher or a stair chair or something of that effect. So, if not, and the person is, I hope I hire people that are able to make that distinction as far as, if somebody's feeling uncomfortable, you should be able to notice that they're uncomfortable. If somebody asks you to leave and, you're in a situation where you're able to, then just leave. I guess one of the biggest things that I try to stress on my officers here is don't have too much pride, okay? And don't be that person. Don't be that person that's going to be like, well, they told me to leave, so I'm not going to leave. That isn't tolerated. If somebody tells you to leave and you are in the position where you can, then leave. So.
Okay. Do your officers have firearm training on a regular basis? Do they go to the firing range, for example, periodically?
Absolutely. We try to train twice a year. We do one qualification a year, but we try to train more than that. By mass standards, you're only required to
Well, I think Kristen or Marcus, you're going to have to take over here. I think we lost Dan.
Not sure what happened, but as Chief was saying, are you guys able to hear me?
Yes.
As Chief was kind of in the middle of saying, mass standards are require us to qualify once a year. However, we do more than that. So as he said, we do qualify once a year just to fulfill the standards, but we try to go at least twice a year.
We never skipped a beat here, Dan. You're back, I see.
Look at that. Marcus jumped right in. I try. Yeah, I got to keep my hands away from the screen here. So, yes, Marcus covered that. Yes, we do. We try to train at least twice a year.
Okay.
And a few of the officers like to go out and practice on their own as well.
We're going to move on to de-escalation. And there are two questions, but I'll combine them. What training specifically do the officers receive related to de-escalation, and what strategies do you employ to de-escalate tense situations?
Yeah, so we, in defensive tactics training, you are taught that from the very beginning. Um, Within our use of force continuum, the first thing you do is called contact controls. Essentially, contact controls are talking to people and trying to de-escalate the situation from there. Um, and I think that that is probably the best strategy we have working for our department, is that my officers can talk, and sometimes, it's a lot of talking. But as I've said to the select board, I think in both my interview for chief and both my interview for being an officer here is I get paid by the hour. So, my goal is to work smart, not hard. And I think keeping that in mind, our officers are, at least the ones under my control, are told to always talk and always take your time with situations. And I think that's one of the biggest things that is a problem in policing, is that officers have that pride thing. We touched on it before, but they have this pride, is in like, they're not going to do what I say, so we're going to bring it up to the next level. And it's just not necessarily needed in most situations. And I've seen situations like that in my own career and gotten in plenty of arguments with other officers as to why that's a bad idea. And now I'm in the position to be able to make that, make it a good idea in order to just talk to people. I think a lot of times some officers may come in, up here, when they really need to come in down at the person's level and talk to them like you'd be talking to your friend. There's always going to be people that may be, dealing with mental illness, maybe dealing with a family death, a family emergency. I mean, there's so many different things that people are dealing with on a daily basis. And I think that having that understanding, having that ability to talk to people is something that the two officers that are working all the time up here have down pat, being able to talk to people. And that's hugely important, because I think, and I've touched on this, I know I've talked to Becky about it, I know I've talked to April, Elaine, Melissa. A lot of officers, for whatever reason, are socially inept. They can't talk to people unless they're talking down to them. And for some reason, they think that if they're not talking down to them, they are putting themselves in a disadvantaged position as far as their safety. And I couldn't disagree with that more. So I guess that's the, kind of what I try to push here, and it's worked.
Okay, I just want to take a moment here and say that looks like I've got 3 more themes to get through. It's only about 10 past 7 at this point. So I'm optimistic that we're going to be able to take some additional questions live, I guess you might say, this evening. So I just want to let people know that you would do that. Some of you have already, I see, by using the chat function at the bottom of your screen. Hopefully that's there for all of you. So if you do have specific questions that you want to submit, just do it through the chat function. And then as soon as I finish with the 3 other themes that I have, I'll start reviewing those and start asking the chief some of your specific questions. Okay. So information sharing. Can the department website be updated regularly, include current policies and practices, especially regarding racial justice and COVID matters? You're muted, Dan.
We don't have direct access to the town's website. And I don't think anybody that may know me probably doesn't want me to have access to that type of technology, because something bad will happen. But I guess what my answer would be is that, I think we have to work closer with the people that are in charge of that in order to update and have continuous updates. We try to update as much as we can on our Facebook page, but we understand that not everybody has that access. So I am open to all ideas of, increasing that, that ability.
Okay. I see Becky smiling. Maybe she's got some ideas. I guess one of the previous chiefs had provided weekly reports about police activity in the town, and I'm not sure, exactly where they were posted, but is that something that you would consider or you would do?
Certainly something I would consider. I think that a monthly update would probably be a little better because there is some weeks that go by that we may not have much going on. But I think that, it's definitely something, if it helps the community better see and be more transparent to the community, I'm certainly open to that idea. And I don't know, where that would be posted. I agree with there. I don't know how that would work, but I'm certainly open to the idea.
So, Dan, related to that, are the policies that you folks operate under, that's all public information, I assume?
Yes. Becky and I briefly talked about that. There's probably only I would say, it's a 798 page policy book. And I think there may be a couple things there that would be directly related to officer safety that may not be public record, but we haven't dove into that yet. But we certainly are going to. Becky and I had the conversation today, so we're certainly going to go into that and make as much of it or all of it public as soon as we can.
Okay, great, thank you. Complaint protocols. What protocols or procedures are in place if someone feels that they were harassed or discriminated against, presumably by a police officer?
Yeah, so right now, because we don't have a sergeant in place, all complaints would come to me. If the complaint was about myself, I would hope that the person would go to either the town administrator or the select board with it. If the complaint's about an officer, it would go to me. I would investigate that complaint, and we would, work with the person on the complaint and figure out how or what they would like to see happen, or what their, issue was and the severity of it. And it would all be situational as far as the complaint goes, but it would go to me. In writing is the best way to do it, just so there's a record of it. You certainly call in a complaint, that's not a problem, but in writing would be the best way to do it.
And what assurances could you provide to residents that it is safe to bring a complaint?
Well, there's a couple different ways I can make that assurance. My department, so if it's a member of my department that the complaint is about, or if it's about me, but my department's a direct reflection of me. So that directly reflects on my personal morals, my standards, and what I believe in. So that complaint will be taken seriously every time, all the time. And if it's about me, I know the select board. They are a great group of people, and they will take the appropriate action if it's something against me. I think that people need to understand that this isn't just a job for me. It's more of a trying to change and I think I've been a little different than most chiefs. So I'm trying to change the narrative on how things work in policing. So you can certainly be rest assured that the complaint, if there is one, is safe to be brought to me if it's about one of the officers. And if it is about me, go above my head and go to the select board or the town administrator.
Okay, the last subject area or theme that I have is related to the needs of your department. What does the Shutesbury Police Department need in terms of additional support from the town or the community?
I think it's going to sound really corny to a lot of people, but this right here, this type of interaction, and I'm happy that we'll have some time to field other questions, but this type of interaction is really what's going to move the department forward. So if we don't know about things that the town needs or residents are looking for, or other assistance that regular residents need. If we don't know what those things are, then we can't help solve that problem. So I think that that's really important, to have that open dialogue and understand that, you know, I'm available to be reached by email almost all the time. I think there's a bunch of people that can attest to that. And I think that, you know, some of the things that I would like to see is I hear about things on Nextdoor Shutesbury, and I think it's a great community forum. But in order for us to understand what's going on out there, those, you know, issues, complaints, concerns, they need to come directly to me, in order for us to have some sort of solution to any problem or concern the town may have. So I think, you know, letting everybody know, especially that's on here, and let everybody know that, you know, that's on Nextdoor Shutesbury, to bring any issues you have and just email me. Because, you know, if you have an issue with the police department, I need to be able to fix it. And we don't use Nextdoor Shutesbury as a source of information to fix those problems.
I know you mentioned it once already, but here's another opportunity to tell everyone what your email address is.
Yes, plug it. police.chief@shutesbury.org. And I read that email regularly on off-duty weekends. I'm usually on there. So.
Okay, great. We'll probably add, you know, mention that once more before the night's done. Next question. Are your officers interested in professional development opportunities? And if so, how could the townspeople help support that?
Yes, my officers, actually, Marcus and Kristen are both going to a crisis intervention training in, I think, a week. And that training is paid for by the town of Shutesbury residents. And that's really important for us to continue to gear towards training and gear towards learning more about topics and situations that we don't know a lot about. And I think that Marcus and Kristen are certainly interested in any opportunities they can get in order to do better at their job. You know, so I think that the townspeople, I believe, certainly have supported that in the past, and they continue to support for the extra trainings and continuing education on certain things is going to be super important for the department.
And finally, what would you or your officers like to see in terms of building bridges with the residents of the town?
You know, I think just more community involvement. I mean, I hate to harp on the same idea as the first part of the question, first part, but, you know, being able to communicate with the police department and be able to tell us what we can do. You know, we are a service-oriented profession. So, you know, when we're called somewhere, we're called there to solve a problem. We're problem solvers. And I think that, you know, we're problem solvers, and we need to be able to know what the problems are in order to solve them. Whether it's, you know, the person that you see speeding down your road every day, and you just, you know, don't want them to get a ticket, but you just want them to, hey, you know, can you go talk to them and just tell them, you know, my dog gets scared when they fly by at that speed. And this is something we've done. So, you know, to have somebody reach out and be able to give us problems that we can help solve is going to be really important for us, because we can't solve the problem without you know, having the problem in front of us.
Okay, well, that wraps up the prepared questions that I had received. I know we have several on the chat function here that I'll review in a moment. While I'm doing that, I want to give you an opportunity, Dan, to just hit on any other topics or questions that have not come up tonight, or things that you would want to convey, if any. And I'll be reviewing the other questions now.
Yeah, I think that, you know, I think that we've certainly covered a lot. And I think that, you know, moving forward, I'm certainly open to this being a more frequent event in order to reach the townspeople. My hope would be that eventually we could be doing this in person, and we could be, talking and having this conversation. As far as LTCs, it's been a lot of questions sent to my email about license to carries. Just to go on that again, we are still processing them, and we still will be processing them. So that's important for everybody to know. We still are, responding to every call. And, what I can say and what I encourage people to do, is to call. We've had a few situations recently where I've gotten a call on my office phone, a day or two after a road rage incident occurred, or something of that nature. And I think that, I guess my biggest thing is to call and, let us know what's going on, because, we really want to show the town that we're there for them and that we're able to help them. In most cases, we're going to be able to help you. And to do that, we just need to know what's going on. So reach out, let us know what's going on, and reach out and just say hi. That's really good for the officers. They don't mind chatting with people and just talking about current events in town. So reach out. Don't be afraid to reach out. And we have a department that's super open to that, and we want to make sure that people understand that. So that's all I have. We covered a lot.
Okay, and we do have more.
Okay.
One specific question again about the LTCs. Do you know offhand how many people in town have licenses to carry firearms?
I don't know offhand how many. We have a couple file cabinets. We have a couple file cabinets with LTCs, so I don't know the exact number. I'm sure I could figure that out. If they were looking for a number on that, I can say that I process a fair amount every week. So I don't know what that number is exactly.
Okay. So here's a question that you can chime in on if you want. It may be more appropriate for one of the other town officials, but one person was asking if the town had a police oversight committee in the past, and is there any reason to not have an oversight committee now?
So
anyone want to deal with that?
I can touch on it. I can touch on this pretty quickly. I don't know about the past. I know the past 2 years we have not. I think so. An oversight committee, I think, is different than a review board, correct? I think that the two are pretty distinctly different. The Citizens Oversight Committee, I think in a small town like this can become pretty cumbersome. A review board, if there's an incident involving an officer that is something that needs to be reviewed, it will be technically reviewed by citizens, because it will be immediately reviewed by the select board, the town administrator. So it is reviewed by, elected officials in town. I don't know what the mechanism would be to form any sort of review board for incidents that may occur, but maybe that Becky or somebody else can kind of chime in on that.
Vicky?
I haven't had cause to put together any review boards for any of our officers in the past 12 years. And I don't believe it's either issues have been handled by the chief in the past, or so we haven't had an officer review board. As far as an oversight committee, I think the structure of Shutesbury's town government is such that the select board is in charge of policy for the police department. They are also, Dan is a strong chief. He is not under the direct supervision of the select board as if he weren't a strong chief. But he does respond to policy direction. And as town administrator, I am in charge of daily activities and working with and communicating with department heads and relaying information to the select board. So there's a process in place where activities of the police department changes are regularly communicated with our select board and discussed. Dan is frequently attends select board meetings to share information. I did want to mention the two policies that Dan instituted, the first being the ride-along policy, which he brought to the select board at his suggestion. And he also instituted the body camera policy, which was added to the mammoth 700-page document that the police department has as a manual. So there are mechanisms in place where the public through the select board does have regular communications with our police department, which may not be true in larger cities and towns.
Dan, can you describe the ride-along policy a little more?
Yeah, so the ride-along policy, unfortunately, is something we can't do right now. But the ride-along policy, is really something that I thought was important because we didn't have one, for town residents that are interested in what we do or interested in, policing in general, or somebody that looks to want to get into the police field. This essentially just gives us more protection to be able to bring somebody with us if something were to happen. It's essentially a policy in place to protect, the town and protect the police department in that situation. But basically, when we were able to do them, if you wanted to go on a ride along with the police department, a couple hours or whatever it may be, you're able to just essentially sign a waiver and come on in and see what we're all about. So.
Great, sounds good. So we've reached the 90-minute mark, which was, I think, the kind of the general goal for the evening, to go at least 90 minutes. But since we have about maybe a half dozen more questions, we'll at least get through those. I guess I'd let people know that now would be your last chance to submit additional questions if you'd like. Otherwise, we'll just kind of wrap up with what I have here. So the first one is kind of a combined comment and question. It's related to information sharing, I guess, from the police department. The comment is that Facebook is not an official platform. It's a private platform, so may not be a way to officially post or convey information. You can comment on that if you want, but let me add the second part of that comment, and that's regarding masks and shields. Is it appropriate, or might it be appropriate in some cases, for an officer to be wearing a face shield instead of a mask, when like making stops or talking with a motorist?
So the first question, I understand it's not an official way to get information out there. With Facebook's popularity, we find that, a lot of people are able to see some of the things we do, in an unofficial capacity. So we have had some success with using that as a platform. The town website, as long as it's, we can find a streamlined way to get the information out there, I'm more than willing to work with somebody on that situation. As far as a face shield, kind of what I'm thinking or what I'm picturing would be a large plastic shield that comes over your face and is strapped around your head. No, I don't think that's something that officer should have to add to their duty belt, is a face shield. So. I think you're muted, Paul.
Yes, I am. I hope I understand this question. I'll just read it. Maybe you'll understand it. Is there a program of rehearsing calls for backup from neighboring communities? So I think maybe what they mean is, neighboring communities who may not be familiar with our town. Is there a way to kind of do some rehearsing so that they can maybe
Yeah.
get to know the community
Yeah,
more?
no, yeah, we work with all of our surrounding towns pretty often, minus Wendell. We work with New Salem, Pelham, and Leverett pretty often. My officers all have a general idea of the roads in each of those towns, and I think vice versa. I think that those towns also have an idea as to the main thoroughfares within towns, so they can respond, and they have pretty good response times to come back us up. So I think it works out pretty well. We're very lucky to have good people around us.
Good. How do you ensure constant coverage and availability with such a small team? Do the part-time employees in your department work for other towns as well?
Yes. So, the goal is we try to have scheduled shifts every week for the part-timers. Right now we're in process of training one, and another one works full-time at another police department. And one of the other part-timers works as a dispatcher somewhere full-time. So in hours where we don't have Shutesbury police officers on, the state police take over coverage, and their coverage is pretty good. It really depends on where they are at the time, because they cover from Shutesbury to Ware. So it's quite a big coverage area. That's why we try to have coverage in the busiest times, as much as we can.
Okay, here's another question. How is the current national level of protests and calls to defund police affecting your personal or psychological or emotional well-being, your sense of pride in your position, your calling to be a police officer at the local level? And are there any therapeutic services for your officers to help them cope with those stresses on the job?
Well, first, I really appreciate the question, and I think there's a lot to unpack there. But that's a great question. I think if any officer were to sit there and say it doesn't affect them, they're lying to you. I think it does affect, as far as protests to specifically defund the police. I want to just make sure that's specific. There's other protests going on that I think a lot of officers agree with, and agree there needs to be some sort of action taken. But specific to defunding the police, I think it is kind of a gut check to some extent, and it does affect officers. Officers' willingness, not willingness. I would say their spirit, I guess you could say. It does affect officers. I think, we have pretty candid and open conversations in our department in order to try and make sure that the officers are feeling comfortable and are feeling and know that, we have a town, I believe, we have a town that does back up the police department and does believe that we have a good department here. My personal experience with the administration in this town has been great. In the 2 years I've been here, well, in the 4 years or 3.5 years I've been here total, my interactions with them have been great. That's something that we hang on to and like very much. And I think that that's kind of, where we draw our strength from in a time where, the national narrative may be a little negative towards police. I think that that's, we got into this profession for a reason. And I use that word because it is a profession. And the people that committed murder and caused this to start are not professionals, and they're not good people. So I think that knowing that we have a good staff here of good people, and we're surrounded by what I think is a really great community, I think that we have a good thing going. And the officers here are steadfast in their, in their mission to continue to be good for the community.
Okay, I've got one last question, unless someone wants to send one in the next minute or so. Last one I have is, can information about complaints and outcomes be made available to Shutesbury residents?
I think I don't know what the policy of the town is on that as far as complaints and outcomes. There has not been any in my time here. So I don't know the answer to that legally, and I don't know what the town administration would feel about that. So I don't know the answer to that question, I guess. I think there is certain legal parameters that we need to follow by. I don't know if Becky may have a little more information on this, because we dealt with this briefly before I became chief, Becky. So I don't know what your understanding is about that.
I have found that there are restrictions because of people's privacy rights on what information can be shared and not shared. And we have an excellent labor attorney that I call upon if a situation of that sort arises. And we would, the town administration does find itself unable to share details because of legal limits on personal complaints at some time, in specific instances, which did occur a couple of years back. So we are not always able to share. I think if the complaints are about a direct action that has become public, as was the case with George Floyd, that becomes a different story. But even there are specific rules and regulations in place, and I know there's just been an overhaul by the legislature on those that regarding liability officers have and guaranteeing immunity and those issues. So it's that I can't give a specific answer without a specific situation, but it's likely we wouldn't be able to make that information public. But we would do what we could.
Okay, I did receive one absolutely final question. And before I pose that, I will ask Becky if this meeting, the recording of this meeting will be made available or be available somewhere on the town website. I don't think she heard me.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Walter. I apologize. Did anybody else hear Walter Tibbetts? He just alerted me that there is a bat flying up and down my hallway. And
No,
that means,
Becky, take care of that before I leave.
that means Dan comes out of his office first. I'm sorry, and I didn't hear your question, Paul.
The question was, will the recording of this meeting be available afterwards to residents?
Yes, I'll get it posted tomorrow. I should, within about an hour, I'll get my downloads of the recording, and we will put it up online on the, we'll make a police page and put it on the police page. How's that for a start, Dan?
I like that idea.
Okay,
Sounds
we'll
good to
do
me.
that.
Okay, so then the absolute final question then, Dan, are there calls that you wish it was possible to redirect to mental health or social service workers? And if so, do those resources even exist in the town?
So we work with mental health services fairly often, I guess, on some calls. The issue with that is that we usually use those services once we have secured the scene. So we have gone, I guess the more recent one that I can think of was at a Department of Mental Health home. It may have even been a private business that runs the home, where there was an assault that occurred with one of the residents who assaulted one of the staff members. You know, there was an assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. We responded to that situation, and we were able to, you know, quell the violent part of the situation by talking to all the parties involved, and there was no need for physical force, which is awesome. And I, you know, give credit to the officers that were there with me. You know, but that's a house that has mental health services on staff, and they called us for assistance in that position. But there's other situations where we will call crisis for individuals that may need help that the hospital can help them with, and we just help basically facilitate to get them to those situations or to those places. So we do work directly with mental health counselors and mental health professionals throughout our you know, operations in many situations, and we'll continue to do so. They are certainly I mean, the saying overworked and underpaid is probably the understatement of the year on that one. And I think if anybody can kind of attest to that, that would be April, if she's still here.
Yes.
I could see her, and she certainly understands that. And we are lucky to have some people that are available to help with situations like that. But
I'd also like to tag on to that as somebody in the field, that when we're concerned about a client, we will often call the local police to do a well-being check. So that's something that you also, another service that you also provide or can provide.
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, I think going back, and I sound like a broken record here, but going back to hiring practices and who you're hiring, and anybody that may work in a position of administration in another job or anything like that can understand that who you hire and who you bring on to your business, to your department, is just crucially important. It is, I mean, there's no amount of training or amount of equipment or amount of you know, time behind the job. If the person isn't a good person and the person is not from the beginning, you're not going to make them a good person. So I think that's really what's going to come down to how officers handle situations, is how they were, very well brought up. How they were brought up and what they were brought up to believe is the right thing to do. And I think that we have a real great hiring process here, and we have great people that, you know, confirm hirees and that interview hirees, and that is the most important thing. And if it takes longer to make the right hire, then it takes longer. I know I've told the select board this in the past: if I don't find somebody that's right, I won't hire anybody. So, and you know, that makes, you know, the job of other officers and myself a little harder because of the workload, but it's not worth hiring somebody that's not going to be a good fit. So.
Well, my opinion is that you were a very good hire as well, Dan, and I want to thank you for taking this time tonight. I know I learned a great deal from this conversation. I also know that if I have follow-up questions, I can send an email to you at police.chief@shutesbury.org. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I've already received a couple emails to my email during the meeting. So it's great to see. And I want to make sure that everybody knows that, you know, just because we're in this this national situation right now and this national dialogue, and just because it may, you know, fizzle out a year from now, you know, we want to keep this open dialogue. At least I do, with the Shutesbury Police Department and the residents. So.
Great. Well, thank you again for your part in setting this up, along with Becky and the select board. And before we close, I would just ask if any of those other people have any last words.
Well, I also wanted to thank the community for the really thoughtful, interesting questions that, and to you, Paul, for being able to synthesize it in such a very cohesive manner. But I thank you all for your wonderful questions. and the police department for being willing and able to talk, Dan and your 2 officers. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, April.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Ah, there she is.
Thank you very much.
Okay, well, again, remember that this whole session has been recorded and will be available on the town website within a day or two. And thank you all again for participating, and maybe we'll do this again sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Good night, all.
Good
Night.
And I reclaim the host, Paul.
Okay, thank you. I can leave now.
Yeah, now you're free to go.
All right, bye-bye.
Good night. Good night, everyone.